Are these two skaters truly breathing as one? That was the question many fans asked after watching Riku Miura and Ryuichi Kihara, the beloved Japanese pair known as Riku Rayu, glide across the ice with a level of unity that almost felt unreal. There was a moment when even overseas commentators seemed to lose their words. It was not because of a massive lift. It was not because of a powerful throw jump. It was not even because of a dramatic twist. It was because, for a few unforgettable seconds, Riku and Ryuichi moved as if they were not two separate skaters at all, but one single soul skating across the ice. That quiet perfection left fans around the world holding their breath. How did they create that kind of connection? How did two people learn to move with such perfect timing that even the smallest gestures seemed to match naturally? And why were overseas fans more amazed by their synchronization than by the biggest tricks in the program? Today, we are looking at why the world was stunned by Riku and Ryuichi's flawless synchronicity, the long trust behind that connection, and the special rhythm only these two could create together. In sports, the most emotional moments are not always the loudest ones. Sometimes, the real magic lives in the quiet seconds between the big elements. It appears in the way a skater breathes before moving, the way an arm rises with the music, or the way two partners feel the same emotion without needing to look at each other. That is exactly what made this story so powerful. Pair skating has never been an easy field for Japan. For many years, the discipline was dominated by teams from Europe, Russia, China, and North America. The image of pair skating was built around power, size, strength, huge lifts, fast twists, and dramatic throws. Because of that, many people believed it would be extremely difficult for a Japanese pair to reach the very top of the world. Riku Miura and Ryuichi Kihara were not the kind of team that simply overwhelmed everyone with size or raw strength. They had to find another way. They had to create a weapon that belonged only to them, and that weapon became their breath, their timing, their trust, their ability to move together so naturally that it no longer looked like they were trying to match each other. It looked as if they already understood each other before the movement even began. When people talk about Riku Rayu, they often mention the big elements first. The lifts where Ryuichi carries Riku high above the ice, the twist where she flies into the air, the side-by-side jumps where both must land at the same time, the throw jumps where one mistake could lead to danger. Those elements are breathtaking, and anyone watching pair skating for the first time would naturally be amazed by them. But longtime overseas figure skating fans noticed something even deeper. They noticed that Riku and Ryuichi were not only strong in the big moments, they were almost perfectly connected in the small ones. The entrance into a step, the timing of an arm, the angle of the shoulders, the moment they lowered their knees, the way they slowed down together, the way they held the silence after a movement ended. Those tiny details revealed the true level of their partnership. A lift lasts only a few seconds. A throw jump happens in an instant, but the feeling of a program comes from everything between those elements. That is where the audience feels whether two skaters are simply performing side by side or whether they are truly living inside the same world. And with Riku and Ryuichi, that world felt complete. Overseas commentators noticed it immediately. One arm movement began at exactly the same time. Their glide did not separate by even a fraction. Riku seemed to move, and Ryuichi already seemed to know where she was going. Even the way their knees softened into the ice looked the same. That is not easy. Two people skating in the same direction may look simple, but in reality, it is incredibly difficult. If one skater moves half a second early, the picture breaks. If one arm rises slightly higher, the line changes. If one knee bends deeper than the other, the whole movement loses balance. Now imagine doing all of that while entering lifts, changing direction, building speed, performing choreography, controlling expressions, and following the emotion of the music. That is why fans were so amazed. Riku and Ryuichi did not look like they were forcing themselves to match. They looked like they were already connected, and that is the beauty that cannot be fully explained by scores. Figure skating has technical points and component scores, but some things cannot be captured completely on a judging sheet. The height of an arm can be measured, the level of a lift can be called, but the feeling that two people are breathing together is something far beyond numbers. Among all the moments fans discussed online, one simple movement seemed to stay in people's minds the most. It was not a jump, it was not a lift. It was the moment Riku and Ryuichi reached their arms out together. At first glance, it may have looked like a small piece of choreography, but the more people watched it, the more powerful it became. Their hands did not just rise to the same height, their timing before the movement matched. Their fingers opened with the same softness. Their eyes followed the same emotional direction. Even after the movement ended, the afterglow stayed in the same place. It was like watching one wave move through two bodies. Online, fans could not stop talking about it. Some said, how can they be this perfectly in sync? Others said, they are supposed to be two people, but they look like one living being. Another fan wrote, I got chills not from the lift, but from the way their simple movements matched. That reaction says everything. The world was not only impressed by how difficult their skills were, the world was moved by how deeply connected they looked. Their power was not only in height or speed, it was in trust, it was in patience. It was in years of learning each other's rhythm until even silence became part of the performance. That is what makes Riku Ryu different. They do not simply skate together, they breathe together. And when two athletes reach that level of connection, the audience feels something beyond sport. They feel the story, the trust, the history, and the invisible promise between two people who have built their entire world on the ice together. Many fans said they felt chills not during the jump, but during the moment, Riku and Ryuichi reached their hands out at the exact same time. They were not moved simply by the difficulty of the elements. They were moved because the two skaters seemed to carry the same emotion inside the same piece of music. What touched people was not the height of a lift or the power of a throw. It was the feeling that Riku and Ryuichi were surrounded by the same atmosphere. That was the real reason this performance spread so quickly online. Usually, the moments that go viral on social media are loud, dramatic, and easy to understand. But with Riku Ryu, the moment people kept talking about was incredibly delicate. It was just two skaters quietly extending their arms together, and yet the world noticed. That says something important. It shows how carefully the audience was watching. It also shows how real the performance felt. When a small movement can move people across the world, it means the skating has gone beyond technique. It has become emotion. What also came through from this performance was that Riku and Ryuichi's skating moved people beyond victory, rankings, or medals. Overseas fans often described their style as something that did not overpower the audience with force. They did not win hearts only through speed, strength, or difficulty. Instead, they seemed to melt into the music together. That kind of performance reminds people why figure skating is beautiful in the first place. The audience was not emotional simply because one team defeated another. They were emotional because years of effort, trust, struggle, and partnership had finally taken visible form on the ice. There are performances that impress you, and then there are performances that stay with you. Riku and Ryuichi's performance belonged to the second kind. The heart of their skating was not just technique. It was the relationship between them. Ryuichi Kihara has long been seen as the partner who protects and supports Riku Miura completely. On the ice, he gives the impression that he will never let her fall. Off the ice, fans have often noticed the same natural care in the way he looks after her. That protective presence became one of the foundations of their trust. But when you watch their synchronicity closely, you realize something even deeper. Ryuichi is not the only one supporting the partnership. Riku supports him too. She leads the emotion, she shapes the atmosphere, she brings softness, expression, and feeling into the performance. Ryuichi gives strength, stability, and security. Riku turns that strength into beauty. That is why they feel so balanced. One is not simply the star while the other stands behind. They bring each other forward. Ryuichi's support makes Riku's expression shine, and Riku's expression makes Ryuichi's strength feel even more meaningful. That is why the whole performance looks like one complete picture. The strongest teams do not always need words. Sometimes their trust is already clear before anything is said. They move in the same direction because they have built that direction together over years. And that is exactly what the world seemed to recognize in Riku Ryu. Overseas fans kept returning to one idea. This was not just synchronization, this was trust. People asked, how can they be this perfectly together? Others said, they are supposed to be two people, but they look like one living being. And as more people rewatched the performance, their reactions became even deeper. Some fans said Riku and Ryuichi were not simply skating to the music, they were creating the music together. Others said it did not look like one partner was adjusting to the other. It looked like both of them shared the same inner rhythm. That phrase, shared rhythm, may be the best way to describe them. Their skating did not feel forced. It did not feel calculated. It felt lived in. It felt like something created through years of trust, daily practice, quiet patience, and countless moments when they learned how the other person breathes, moves, reacts, and feels. That is why many overseas fans said the performance was worth watching again and again. The first time you notice the big elements. The second time you notice their faces. The third time you notice the hands, the timing, the pauses, and the way the music seems to move through both of them at once. And after watching it again, you begin to understand why so many people were deeply moved by their connection. One of the most emotional reactions from overseas fans focused on something Riku Miura once expressed. If Ryuichi retired, she would retire too, because she could not imagine continuing with another partner. After watching this performance, many fans said they understood why. A connection like this cannot simply be replaced. It is not just about finding another strong skater. It is not just about learning new choreography with someone else. What Riku and Ryuichi built was something much deeper than technique. It was the breath of two people who had shared years of life, pressure, fear, trust, and dreams together. That is why Riku Rayu felt like one complete work of art, not two separate athletes, not one skater supporting the other, but two people creating one story with the same heartbeat. What gave me chills was not only the overseas reaction itself, but the way that reaction changed over time. At first, people were simply amazed by the skill. They saw the difficulty, the timing, the clean movement, and the beauty of the elements. But the more they watched, the more their understanding became deeper. Slowly, the reaction changed from, "This is incredible technique," to, "This is a story of trust." People from different countries, different languages, and different cultures all seemed to arrive at the same conclusion. What began as admiration for skating became respect for the human bond behind it. That is the kind of reaction you do not see very often. One phrase stayed with me, the breath of two people who have shared part of their lives together. That line feels so powerful because Riku and Ryuichi's perfect synchronization was not born from easy days. It was created through the opposite. Behind that beautiful skating were years of hard practices, repeated mistakes, injuries, frustration, tears, and moments when they must have clashed, doubted, and struggled. But every time they returned to the rink together, and little by little, that breath was built. The 1 second when they stretch out their arms, the instant when their knees soften into the ice, the small moment when they look toward each other, every detail carries years of shared time. That is why overseas fans could not simply describe it as beautiful. They felt something deeper. Pair skating is a sport where even the smallest doubt can appear in the movement. If one partner wonders, "Will they really catch me?" or "Will the timing really match?" the body stiffens, a lift becomes hesitant, a jump entry becomes late, an arm rises just slightly out of rhythm, and that uncertainty can even show on the face. The ice does not allow people to hide the truth. But with Riku and Ryuichi, that hesitation was almost invisible. Riku trusts Ryuichi enough to give him her full body. Ryuichi trusts Riku's movement enough to support her without delay. Because that trust is unshakable, their movements begin at the same time, without fear. Think about it. If the skater being lifted doubts the partner for even a split second, the body tightens and the timing breaks. If the skater supporting hesitates even slightly, the hands arrive late. So when Riku Ryu's skating looks perfectly aligned, it is not just proof of practice. It is proof that there is no doubt between them. Overseas fans saw that. They noticed that when Riku moves, Ryuichi is already moving in the same direction. There is no time for them to check with their eyes. There is no visible counting. Their bodies already know. They know how the other person will move. They know how much power is coming. They can sense whether the other is nervous, tired, sharp, or calm without needing words. That is a level only two people who have spent years together can reach. And maybe that is why their skating feels less like a sport and more like a conversation without words. Riku speaks through her movement, and Ryuichi answers through support. Ryuichi creates the foundation, and Riku replies with expression. Inside the music, the two of them keep speaking to each other without ever saying a word. No matter what pressure existed before the performance, once that conversation begins on the ice, it feels as if they are already safe. Now, when we place their story inside the larger history of pair skating, the meaning becomes even stronger. For a long time, pair skating was often associated with power, size, force, and scale. Many of the dominant teams came from countries with a long tradition in the discipline, and the event was often viewed through the lens of strength, huge lifts, and dramatic elements. Japan, on the other hand, was known more widely for singles skating. Japan produced many world-class men's and women's singles skaters, but pairs was a very different challenge. For a Japanese pair to stand in the center of the world stage once felt like a distant dream. That is why what Riku and Ryuichi accomplished matters so much. They quietly changed the idea that pair skating is only about power. They may not have been the biggest team physically, but they brought speed, precision, softness, warmth, and trust. They showed the world that strength can also look gentle. They proved that synchronization can be just as powerful as height, and that emotional unity can move an audience as deeply as any major element. They gave pair skating another kind of beauty. Beauty built on breath, a beauty built on trust, a beauty built on two people becoming one story. That is why fans around the world saw historical meaning in their skating. They were not only watching a great performance, they were watching a new way to understand pair skating. The sport is not only about power, it is also about connection. And Riku Ryu showed that connection can shake the world. For Japanese fans, this reaction carried an even deeper meaning. When overseas fans said they never expected a Japanese pair to compete at this level, those words reached Japan too. For the people who had supported Riku and Ryuichi for years, seeing the world speak about them with such respect was a source of pride. Japanese fans loved them not only for their scores, medals, or victories. They loved the relationship itself. They loved the way Ryuichi seemed determined to never let Riku fall. They loved the way Riku trusted him completely. They loved the quiet care, the partnership, and the warmth between them. The nickname fans gave Ryuichi, often connected to the way he naturally protects and supports Riku, came from affection, not only admiration. It showed that people were watching the human side of the pair, not just the athletic side, and that is what makes this story so moving. In the end, what Riku Miura and Ryuichi Kihara showed the world was not simply perfect synchronization. It was something far more meaningful. First, they showed a new possibility for pair skating. It does not have to be only about force, size, or huge tricks. Trust, breath, timing, and delicate expression can also capture the world. Second, they turned a long-held Japanese dream into reality. They proved that a Japanese pair could stand proudly at the center of a discipline that once seemed almost impossible to conquer. And third, they showed that some beauty can only be created by two specific people. Not anyone could make this performance. Not any partner could replace the other. This was something only Riku and Ryuichi could build together. That is why the words from overseas fans remain so powerful. They are supposed to be two people, but they look like one living being. You can see the depth of their trust more than the height of their technique. This is not just skill. This is the breath of two people who have shared part of their lives together. Riku and Ryuichi were not just two athletes skating side by side. They were one work of art. After years of mistakes, injuries, pressure, and quiet perseverance, they created a connection that spoke to people around the world. What they gave us was not only a record of victory, it was hope. It was proof that two people can trust each other so deeply that even their silence becomes beautiful. And honestly, the more I followed this story, the more emotional it became. Sports are not only about results. They are not only about rankings, scores, or medals. The deepest emotions often live behind the numbers, in the unseen time, the shared struggle, the trust, and the silent conversations that no scoreboard can explain. No matter how many times I watch the moment Riku and Ryuichi reach their hands out together, it still tightens my chest. Not because it is technically difficult, but because it shows how beautiful human connection can be. What did you feel when you watched their synchronization? Was it the angle of their arms, the timing of their glide, the way they looked at each other after the performance? Please share the moment that touched you most in the comments. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If this story moved you, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. I'll see you again in the next video.